Dear brothers and sisters, χρόνια πολλά. The First National Assembly of Epitavrous, after the beginning of the Greek Revolution, declared that the fight against the Turks is far from being based on demagogic and revolutionary or selfish principles of a minor part of the whole Greek nation. It is a national war, a sacred war, a war solely for the sake of taking back the right of our personal freedom, of possession and honor, which all our neighboring nations in Europe enjoy, which only the cruel and unprecedented tyranny of the Ottomans attempted to abolish violently from us and choke in our very chests. During the Ottoman rule, the Church played a vital role in safeguarding the historical continuity of the Greek nation, in the preservation of Greek civilization and language, and thus its identity. As the sole national and religious institution from the beginning of the Ottoman rule until 1821, and even till today, the Church contributed to the preparation of the fight for freedom. Especially in Cyprus, the history of the Church is in fact one and the same with the history of its people, since a period of freedom in Cyprus, at least during the second millennium, almost never existed due to the long periods of submission by several foreign conquerors. The Church became, in God's providence, the leader of the Christians in the Ottoman Empire. Her spiritual contribution to the cultivation of a Christian consciousness and way of life to the faithful people, often opposed to the Islamic way of life and ethos, which inevitably led to acts of violence and promoted the Islamization of the Greeks and Cypriots. Against that wave of violence and Islamization, a wave of neo-martyrs emerged as a Christian response, which constitutes a very important chapter of the contribution of the Church to the resurrection of the nation. Furthermore, the ethnarchic role of the Church should not be understood as subservience for the mere acquisition of privileges, but rather it was a path from the crucifixion to the resurrection as manifested by the multitude of neo-martyrs, ethno-martyrs, clerics of all ranks and laymen. During this period, the Church was responsible for the education and the special support of the subjugated Christians. Then, what was the spiritual contribution of the Church? The fall of the Christian Empire, particularly the fall of Constantinople in 1453, and the conquest dominance of Islam, Christians turned to the Church. Orthodox people came to meet a different religion based on monotheism, but opposite to the Trinitarian God of the Christian faith, based on aniconic worship opposed to the Christian icons, and the violent enforcement of Muhammad's religion against any toleration of other religions, especially the revelation of the love of the crucified Christ. Unfortunately, we should note that this is still apparent today with actions like the transformation of many Christian churches in Turkey, such as Hagia Sophia and others into mosques. The worship of the Trinitarian God formed the substantial difference and actually the identity of the Christians against the Muslims, and gave the spiritual power to the Orthodox people to repel the violent actions of Islamization. The gathering of the Christians in the churches to worship the true God was also the resistance of the nation against those who were striving to make it disappear. Then we have the neo-martyrs, those who witnessed their Orthodox faith through martyrdom are known as martyrs, but to distinguish between the ancient martyrs of the Roman era and the new martyrs during the Ottoman period, the term neo-martyrs is used for the later group, and in many cases the martyrdom of neo-martyrs was more brutal than that of the ancient martyrs. Text collections dedicated to neo-martyrs were written by St. Nicodemus of Mount Athos, as well as by Macarius of Corinth, together with Athanasius Parius and Nikephoros of Chios, published in Venice in 1819. In their attempt to achieve a gradual Islamization of all the Christian Greeks, the Ottomans proceeded to several cruel actions, such as the so-called pedomazoma, by which young children were taken by force, converted to Islam, and then incorporated in the Ottoman army. Also, they tried to force large numbers of Christians to turn to Islam and killed those who resisted, committing genocides. The Church resisted in this forced Islamization by developing the necessary ways of resistance. First, by cultivating the consciousness that the worship and faith in the true Trinitarian God of the Christian faith was not the same as in the other religions, in this case Islam. Consequently, there was no reason for Christians to abandon the true faith of their ancestors for improving their living conditions or even for saving their lives. Second, the Church's rules for accepting back those who were converted to Islam aimed at preventing more Christians to convert to Islam, and at the same time to make those who had already converted to return back to the Christian faith. Since the Greek nation and the Christian faith were intertwined, apart from preserving the Christian faith, those measures practically contributed to the actual survival of the nation. There were two types of neo-martyrs: those who remained steadfast for their Orthodox Christian faith and were led to martyrdom, and those who were timid and became Muslims, but then returned back to Christianity, and following a spiritual preparation, they publicly confessed their Christian faith and led to martyrdom. St. Nicodemus of Mount Athos writes about the neo-martyrs who became the glory and the pride of the Church and the judgment of non-believers, that their martyrdom revitalized the Orthodox faith. They became ideals of patience for the Orthodox who were under the heavy yoke of oppression and inspired other Christians to imitate them. Therefore, neo-martyrs truly became the wall of resistance against the waves of Islamization They cultivated the endurance in the Orthodox people and safeguarded the Christian and Greek roots of the nation. Among the huge number of neomartyrs during that period, there were also Cypriot neomartyrs, and those who are known are Ioannis the Cypriot, who remain in the history known as Georgios, who martyred in Ptolemaida on the 23rd of April in 1752. Then St. Polydoros, who came from Nicosia and martyred in New Ephesus on the 3rd of September in 1794. The third is Michael the Cypriot, who lived in Samothraki and martyred in Thrace on the 6th of April in 1835. Also, of course, the Archbishop of Cyprus, Cyprian Kyprianos, and the ethno-martyrs of the 9th of July in 1821, and there we have many of these names, more than 300 people killed at this period. Finally, I would mention also the local martyr priest Zacharias from Paralimni, who was killed by the Turks and whose relics were recently discovered. The ethnarchic role of the Church, then, together with the spiritual role, Church's ethnarchic role was of equal importance. From a cultural perspective, it could be accepted that religion and culture are those fundamental characteristics that are most resilient and important for the survival of the nation. In our case, what was especially evident, it was God's providence and protection in the preservation of the Greek nation under the cruel oppression of Islam, which lasted for more than 4 centuries. The special privileges that were granted by the Ottomans to the Church in order to make tax collection much easier became, in fact, the means for the preservation of the nation. It became, if you like, the Trojan horse of the Christians within the Ottoman Empire. The Church managed to support and aid the enslaved Christians, particularly through the community organization, charity, and education. I conclude that the Church never actually distinguished herself from her people. Church fight and struggle during the Ottoman rule was for faith and homeland. Thus, we admire all those who fought and sacrificed their lives for liberty, for religious freedom, for dignity, and for new cultural values. The Greek nation knows from bitter experience the terrible coexistence with Turks and of Christian faith with political Islam. Of course, today we accept the modern understanding of a multicultural society and the coexistence with people of different religious and cultural backgrounds in order to avoid any conflicts that would devaluate the existence of human being as a person. The Greek Revolution in 1821, in which the whole Greek nation took part, in which all Greeks, clerics and laymen alike, who were living in the Ottoman Empire contributed, should not be confined as part of the Greek history only, but also should be seen as a major and pivotal fact of the European and world history at large, as it defined the modern geographic and cultural borderlines between Christianity and Islam. The Greek nation fought against the waves of Islamic fundamentalism and fanatism with its own physical sacrifice, as in 1821 or in 1921. We remember the genocide in Asia Minors, and of course for Cyprus in 1974 with the Turkish invasion in Cyprus. In all its dimensions, the Church has humbly offered her services to the Greek nation, a service that has mainly developed the true hope which has been vital in any struggle for our national existence. Thank you and χρόνια πολλά.